You have the entire world has universal health care. Cuba's got universal health care. Canada's got universal health care. Mexico, Norway, Sweden, UK, France, name a fucking country. Bulgaria, Romania. I saw another crazy ass country. I was like, what the fuck? That country, if that country had, so Europe, all of Europe has universal health care. Nearly all of South America has universal health care. All the industrialized nations, it's health. Health is life. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. So life is health care. Liberty is prison, reform our prison industry. And then the pursuit of happiness, I think education could be thrown in there. So the problems that our economy has is the same thing. Warren Buffett was begging us to go ahead and tax him. Warren Buffett was begging us to tax him. So I think that's the economy, the marketplace. Yeah, the workers might demand more because it's a tight marketplace, but they should demand more. So for people to freak out, if anything, they told on themselves, right? The market's all pissed off because the workers are making a few pennies upon the dollar. But we got major issues. Wall Street is not regulated. There's no Glass-Steagal. There's no Dodd-Frank. There's no universal housing, universal child care, universal education, family leave, universal health care. We've never had universal health care. Germany's had universal health care since the 1870s for 150 fucking years. Germany's given a shit about their working class people, about their masses, their peasants, their plebes. They give a shit about their health. The health is their life. If you're a worker or a business owner, everybody's health, it would be better for everybody. Canada, you walk into the hospital, everything's paid, you walk away, no problem. But you stingy assholes, you guys want, epidemics, you want pandemics, there's small towns in Indiana that are just getting hit with STDs. I mean, the stupidity, it's not just dumb, not only is it callous and unempathetic, but a conservative argument would be, do you want everybody in your neighborhood to be fucking sick? How does that help you? So the problems that we have is a whole bunch of problems. There's a whole bunch of problems we're not talking about. We have massive poverty. 15% of the American people are poor. That's 43 million people. 43 Americans live in poverty. Home ownership is going down from 70% to 60%. Home ownership is going down. Why is home ownership going down? Bitcoin is making strong gains. Wall Street had to put a cap on it because it was turning into a tulip bubble. Another bubble. The fiat greenback is slipping. The fiat greenback isn't being traded between Russia and China anymore. That's why Bitcoin is making its gains, because the greenback is also fiat, just like Bitcoin is fiat. We got record wealth and inequality. The oil companies making shit ton, so much money, not even fun, right? Just so much money. Meanwhile, 43 million Americans live in poverty. You had Hugo Chavez went ahead and paid for some heating oil for New Yorkers, poor New Yorkers, but America can't do that for their own poor. Poverty, we got 43 million Americans are in poverty. It's 13.5% as of 2015. So that means more than 1 out of 10 of us. You see 10 people today, one of them is living a death sentence. Poverty is a death sentence. And even worse than poverty is homelessness. They say at least 500,000. But 500,000 homeless, is that it? That means we could have solved homelessness a long fucking time ago. 500,000. 500,000. 500,000 Americans have no homes. 10,000. We could buy cheap ass homes for about $10,000. You could solve homelessness for 10,000 times 500,000. So that's 4 zeros on top of it. For $10 billion, you could solve homelessness. $10 billion. You say, oh man, 10 billion, that's too much. You know how much we just spent for the war machine? $700 billion. So 10 billion is only, it's less than 1%. It's, a seventh of 1%. 1/7 of 1% of the war budget would get all the people in America some housing. But let's be honest, we don't give a shit about each other. Some sink, some swim. This is a capitalist society. You live on the streets, fuck you. You didn't have, you made bad choices, right? Your economic success is all on you. You failed, it's your fault. That's the Calvinist way, right? Some are predetermined. Those who get rich, God wanted them to get rich. Those who get poor, because God said, you're not getting into heaven. Wall Street futures. Futures are financial contracts obligating the buyer to purchase an asset or the seller to sell an asset, such as a physical commodity or financial instrument at a predetermined future date and price. So there's, no regulation of Wall Street. There's a multi-trillion-dollar unregulated derivatives market. The derivatives market is the financial market for derivatives, financial instruments like futures contracts or options, which are derived from other forms of assets. The market can be divided into two: that for exchange-traded derivatives and that for over-the-counter derivatives. Over-the-counter futures contracts, options, financial instruments. Do not talk to any financial advisors. Oh my God. So there's no Glass-Steagal, no Dodd-Frank, no regulation of Wall Street. We got a multi-trillion-dollar unregulated derivatives market. But don't worry, the Wall Street futures are going to bang some of the help out General Electric, the Wall Street futures. So the housing bubble, we're getting another housing bubble. We haven't learned our lesson. The housing bubble is reinflating. The savings and loan crisis had to do with housing. 2008 Great Recession had to do with housing, land. Don't put this shit in the hands of Wall Street. This is the bankers in Wall Street taking all of our property, all of our houses, and all of our land, and then selling it off to the highest bidder. Whether it's Russia or Canada, Americans, or who gives a shit. Meanwhile, 500,000 Americans have no homes. 43 million Americans live in poverty. Home ownership is going down. We have over $1 trillion worth of credit card debt. We have over $1 trillion worth of student loan debt. So that's a big bubble. Student loan debt over $1 trillion. Credit card debt over $1 trillion. Wages have been stagnant since the 1980s. Even though there was some gains with wages in the jobs report, ultimately it was very modest. It was very tiny gains, and it was gains through the first 3 quarters, and then the fourth quarter wages dropped. So the fourth quarter wages dropped, which means there were no gains. Wages were still stagnant, just like they've been since the 1980s, which is 4 fucking decades. For 40 fucking years since Ronald Reagan, wages have been stagnant. If they would have gone with the price of everything, minimum wage would be $22 an hour, $22 an hour. If wages went along with profits. But nope, not $22 an hour. For the average wages, actually, I did see was $27, but there's a lot of, $10 an hour wage earners out there. The $27 wage earners make 9 cents more per hour, and then the $10 an hour wage earners or less, you're only making a percentage. So 3 pennies for a $10 an hour wage earner. So if you're making less than $10 an hour, the Wall Street is freaking the fuck out because you made a couple pennies. You made a couple pennies more. And the unemployment rate is so low, you're making a couple pennies more. So that makes that they freaked out. And I got this at the very end. I'll explain that at the very end. So the Dodd-Frank Act was enacted in the U.S. after the aftermath of the crisis of the Great Recession to promote the financial stability of the United States. That was the biggest loss for Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell was like, oh my God, the worst day in my life was when Dodd-Frank was passed. When Dodd-Frank was passed, the worst day. He's been in office for 30 years. He was there through the savings and loan scandal, through so many things. And the worst day of his life was when Wall Street got regulated. So the Basel III capital and liquidity standards were adopted by countries around the world. So there's no regulation. Wall Street is having a fucking heyday, right? As soon as Trump was elected, it's been going up from 18,000 all the way up to 27,000. So we've seen a 9,000 point gain. But then we're seeing 1,000 point drops in a single day while he's talking. So perhaps at first everybody got excited and there's more confidence for the plutocrats to make more money. But now maybe they're starting to think, maybe the American people need to demand something. We're just robbing the shit out of them. the best corrective for the market, I think, would be to get us universal health care. I think that's, not only is that important litmus, but it's life. The American government hasn't given a shit about the lives of the American people the entire time it's been implemented. Every other nation has universal health care. This is ridiculous. Re-fucking-donk-diculous. So everything Bernie Sanders was talking about was just so obvious. Child care, family leave, universal housing. This is just like Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Iceland. These are the happiest. You know what Iceland did? They fired all the bankers, right? We give the bankers fucking billions of dollars. Oh, hey, you fucked our economy. Here's billions of dollars. Hope you don't do it again. Well, here's some laws. Well, let's get rid of those laws. So what you want Wall Street to do is you want steady growth over time. You want steady, consistent growth over time. And so that's, you know, that's what I want, steady growth. So I want some regulation. I want some, Wall Street needs to be regulated. Those criminals, those crooks, those greedy sons of bitches, they'll take everything and anything that they want to. If anything, they might turn this Wall Street crisis into a reason why we need to privatize Wall Street or Social Security. So the Dow Jones Industrial Average is a price-weighted index that tracks 30 of the largest American corporations. 30 of the largest American, so it's an index. It gives you an indication. It's a canary in the coal mine. When the canary dies, you need to get the fuck out. When it stops tweeting, there's, you know, a collapse about to happen. General Electric, IBM, General Motors, AT&T. These are some of the companies included in the Dow. Now, there's the S&P 500, the Wilshire 5000. They're float-adjusted market value weighted. S&P is 500, then the Wilshire 5000 includes all the U.S. equity securities. So people actually say that the S&P 500 and the Wilshire 5000 are better indicators, better indexes of how the market is doing. But the Dow Jones, I think the Dow Jones is America's moral compass. So just looking at the Dow Jones and how the Dow Jones has been going, I've been, 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I've been checking out the Dow. They just had a 0.16% gain from yesterday, so they're hanging in there. They didn't drop, but they're not gaining. They're not going anywhere. This week could be volatile like the last week, right? You had a Black Friday, a Black Monday, and a Black Thursday, which we've actually seen in history. The week could go down. There's two important readings of the U.S. inflation. So today, coming out on Monday, there's two important readings of the inflation of the United States. One is the Consumer Price Index. So the Consumer Price Index is due today. So we'll see how that affects Wall Street. The Consumer Price Index. How's the inflation doing? We'll see. So the median forecasts are for consumer price inflation to slow a little. So to go lower, we're afraid of inflation, but it's 1.9%. Slow a little to 1.9% in January from a year earlier. So inflation's going down. They're freaking out, not because of inflation, not because of the Fed reserves and all that other shit. They just use those words to, talk over your head. So it's like, oh, you don't know, you're dumb. You don't know what the fuck America, you don't know what you're talking about. Figure out the damn Wall Street. Figure it out. What the fuck are they doing? Right? It's all bankers. It's 1%. Some middle class get involved in it. But the vast majority of Americans do not have any investments in Wall Street. And so, technically speaking, nobody should be affected. Wall Street collapses, keep your head up. Fuck Wall Street. This is a wonderful opportunity. I don't even know, why do we even have do we need a Wall Street? Do we need a Wall Street? Is that necessary? I don't know. It doesn't seem right. We're missing 50 million Americans are in poverty. 500,000 Americans have no home. So this is, when there's record profits, massive inequality, so the rich are getting fucking filthy fucking rich, and the poor aren't making anything. They're not getting any better whatsoever. You got all these bubbles. You got a housing bubble. You got a $1 trillion credit card bubble, $1 trillion student loan bubble. Wages have been stagnant for the last 4 decades. Corporate profits are, through the roof. So you got record wealth and inequality. Home ownership is going down. Bitcoin is making gains. The Greenback is slipping. Russia and China don't trade with the greenback anymore. It being the reserve currency has great effects for the United States. If the world isn't using the greenback anymore, it's because they don't trust in our government. They don't have any confidence in our government. So we're also the largest tax haven, right? So wonderful market for corporations. So let corporations and the wealthy and the 1%, let them just run havoc and see what a dumb economic system that is. Hey, rich people, do whatever the fuck you want to do, and good luck. Hopefully it all works out in the end. The point of government is to make sure corporations and Wall Street listen to us. The government's a tool, and we're not using the tool that we have. And then the biggest thing, the two biggest reasons I think this thing is happening, one, the wages are going up, and they hate Wall Street hates the American worker. So just because a couple of pennies upon the hour. And then the other thing is the Plutocrat Tax Cut, just really Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the disaster of capitalism. He's a walking disaster of capitalism. He's a walking shock doctrine. He is the crisis. He is the disaster. And the whole point of shock doctrine is when you have a crisis, so take Puerto Rico, when you have a big crisis, then you shock the nation into compliance with the liberalization of the free markets and the capitalization. So you sell all the state assets, you increase exports, so you really do the opposite of what you think. You listen to Milton Friedman and those economic professors, but you make sure that the people don't get shit. No, they don't get any higher wages, they don't get any health care, they don't get any education. You got to cut all those government services out. You got to let the free market just, people got to work and, move into better places. So you got to let the free market work itself. It makes me think of Allende, Nixon, and Kissinger assassinated Salvador Allende in Chile and shocked the shit out of that economy. And Kissinger said he was going to make that economy scream. And so it's supposed to be like, a model of great success, but that's where the students were protesting for the increase of rates there. And there was lots of people that were killed under the dictator after Salvador Allende. That was in 73. A little bit about the Plutocrat Tax Cut. 87% of the American people's taxes are going to go up. At first, they go down. There's 1,097 pages. So this whole bill is over 1,000 pages. Nobody in Congress read it. None of the Republicans, none of the Democrats. Donald didn't. Nobody read this except for the few people that are actually getting the pork out of this, that are getting the benefits. So the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, this is a plutocrat tax cut. A tax cut for the 1%, for the wealthy, for the estate tax people, for, the super duper wealthy. It's basically definitely for your billionaire class and your millionaire class, possibly your 250,000 class. Anybody below then, it's not affecting anybody. So corporations are given a massive tax break, 35% down to 21%. Great for corporations. It's a permanent tax cut for corporations. There's a temporary tax cut for individuals. It's actually going to go back up in 2025. So the tax cut for individuals decrease over time, and then eventually they actually go up. They actually increase in just 7 years. So in 7 years, the majority of the individual tax cuts are going to go up. The other thing with the tax cuts, the Affordable Care Act's individual mandate is eliminated. The big corporate, it's $1.5 trillion proposal. So we're going to spend $1.5 trillion so that way the 1% and the bankers and the plutocrats can save more money. So we're spending more money out of our pockets so they can get a tax break in theirs. So we're spending $1.5 trillion on this stupid ass so-called tax cut. And not only are we spending that money, but it's helping them out so we have less money for spending for ourselves and for our, children. For Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Reduced lunch, a whole bunch of things that the federal government, roads, highways, bridges. So the federal government now they don't have to worry about. It's $1.5 trillion, so that's just insane amount of money. In order to pay for everything, if we're not going to cut any of the programs, we're going to have to run a deficit. Same thing Ronald Reagan did. He cut taxes And then he put in the budget, everybody had the same amount as before. How did he do that? Same thing Baby Bush does. These fucking tax and spend Republicans get in there. They tax the shit out of us. They run these large deficits to help their one percenters, their plutocrat buddies, their lobbyists, their corporate buddies, the billionaire class. They help the rich fucking people. That's what they do. And they put deficits on us for the future generations. So that's bad economics for the working class. The entire economic system for America is not designed for you and me. It is designed for somebody else. And then corporates, profits, corporations are hierarchical institutions. All the money for Walmart, all the profits go to Arkansas. And it goes to the Walton family. So what else did this tax cut do? The individual tax relief in the Republican tax bill expires altogether. This is due to a Senate budget rule that restricts the cost of the tax bill to $1.5 trillion. Well, it can only cost $1.5 trillion. So they want to sunset nearly all individual tax cuts in order to make corporate tax cuts permanent. Should we give tax cuts to the individuals or to the corporations? Fuck it. Let's go with the corporations. Again, over and over again, when it comes to corporations and the American people, they choose corporate America, right? Those are people. Corporations are individuals. LLCs are individuals. They're people who are deserving of constitutional rights. Of course, they have a right to speak, and they can speak with their pockets and their money. So in 2027, more than half of Americans will actually get a tax increase, 53%, according to analysis from the Tax Policy Center. The tax bill cost $1.46 trillion over 10 years, okay, or $1 trillion when adjusted for economic growth. So the deficit is going to go through the roof. So every decision and I even heard that whole tax cut was the regulation, no, the infrastructure. That's a whole other thing. The infrastructure speech is just one big natural gas pipeline. He just wants to have a bunch of natural gas pipelines all throughout of America, right? You give natural gas pipelines, that'll help the infrastructure. When he talks about infrastructure, he's not talking about healthcare. He's not talking about Wi-Fi. He's not talking about better transportation or better cars or better laptops. Or when it comes to, infrastructure, he's not talking about sewer or water lines. He's not talking about housing. He's talking about oil pipelines, natural gas pipelines. So that's the thing. Fucking Trump his tax cuts aren't for us, the people. It's for the corporations, the 1%. His infrastructure is not for us. It's for his cronies. We're a spoil system. It's a spoil system, and you give your, friends jobs. And so that's just like the boss system. The boss, the corporate boss, boss, Tammany Hall, boss Tweed. It's a spoil system. And it's a corrupt system. So Trump is the national crisis. He's the shock doctrine, the catalyst for disaster capitalism. Milton Friedman, it seems like he's reading his economic books, or a Koch brothers sycophant. He's helping out the Koch brothers. They got, $90 million? So let's help out the Koch brothers. They need some friends too. Yeah, everybody kisses the Koch brothers' ass. You know who people don't give a shit about? The 500,000 homeless people. Trump also wants to sell off national assets, right? Selling off airports, the Washington Dulles airports, probably national parks, and, selling it to the oil and gas industries. Just selling our property. That's our property as a collective whole. And he's selling our property to corporate interest. So a homeless person can't go to the national forest and sleep, but the oil companies can go in there and dig it all up. But just no poor people better not be sleeping in the national forest. There you go. Have a big tent city. Declare one of the national forests the homeless tent city. And then, tell everybody to go there. So, because we get raised minimum wage $10 an hour, and that increased, everybody's wages by pennies. The Plutocrat Tax Cut, infrastructure, all this shit. Boeing and Goldman Sachs are the highest priced stocks, and then Pfizer and General Electric. What does Boeing and Goldman Sachs and Pfizer and General Electric want? Not for the working class to make any fucking money. Not whatsoever. Or they're losing confidence in Trump because they know he's a slime ball. He's a corrupt slime ball. So those are the two reasons for the Dow Jones failing. The problems that we have a shit ton of problems. So when we're looking at the GDP or the Dow Jones and the stock market and the unemployment and the house, there's so many, we're not talking about the poverty rate. We're not talking about the homelessness rate. There's a lot of things we're not talking about. Everything I mentioned. The housing bubble, we're going to see we're seeing another great recession happen right before our eyes. Credit card, over $1 trillion worth of credit card, over $1 trillion in student loan debt. $700 billion we got for war, and we could just print that money up. But for some reason, when it comes to housing, credit cards, student loans, when it comes to child care, when it comes to really infrastructure, that could have been a good idea, but Trump fucked it up. Education, vocational, university, universal health care. All those things are corrective measures. So that way, not only are you taking care of the people, right? Corporations, Germany can do capitalism and socialism better than the United States. They make a shit ton of stuff. Their GDP is through the roof, but they also have very good, lucrative jobs, high-paying jobs. So they have a good social safety net, free college, even free for the Americans. Any Americans can go to Germany and get free college right now today. We don't even provide free college for ourselves, but Germany is providing free college because they want more people to come in, increase the tax base. They want they want that. They want the immigration. They want the exposure because it increases, makes it better for the culture. So, yeah, his infrastructure plans is a bunch of natural gas lines, right? Natural gas lines, a bunch of oil pipelines, a bunch of Keystone. So, the $10 minimum wage they're freaking out about. Trump is the disaster. And the market, I'll end off on this. I'll actually just read this. So essentially, there's 4 reasons stand out for the current market madness. Investors are worried about inflation. There's higher interest rates, rising bond yields, and an overheated stock market. That's what the mainstream media will say. Well, there's big inflation on the way. There's higher interest rates. The Federal Reserve is going to raise the interest rates. There's rising bond yields and an overheated stock market. They'll throw all those terms at you to make sure, hopefully you don't know what the hell they're talking about. Because the first 3 are related. Inflation, higher interest rates, and rising bond yields is all about that workers are getting bigger paychecks. The U.S. Labor Department said workers are getting much bigger paychecks, bigger than economists had expected. I think they're exaggerating a little bit. But companies pay their workers more, and since they pay their workers more, there's a tight labor market. Then workers are going to become more demanding. They won't have to listen to their employers. They'll go for the good jobs. When companies pay their workers more, raise prices to afford the higher labor costs, so they pay workers more, then that means higher labor costs means higher prices. If prices start to rise too fast, the Federal Reserve will raise interest rates. This is insanity because working class people made a few pennies. When rates rise, companies have to pay more to borrow money. This makes them less profitable. Their stocks are less valuable. When prices rise, bonds become less attractive, become inflation. Because inflation eats away at bond investors' returns. When bond prices fall, their yields rise. Low bond yields have been fueling the stock market. Stocks are riskier investments, but we're almost guaranteed to return more to investors than bonds over the past year and a half. The U.S. Treasury will also be issuing more bonds to raise money for the recent tax cuts and budget deal. So we're driving up deficits. So who gives a shit about deficits? Rand Paul cares about it, right? He's not a hypocrite. A bond glut lowers bond prices and raises their rates. Rising yields are giving investors spooked about risk an excuse to get out. Separately, some investors believe the stock market needed a breather. Stocks are starting to look pricey after rising nonstop since not November. They've been rising for the past 3 decades. So fucking Wall Street is kicking ass. But apparently the higher wages, whatever's good for Main Street, what's good for the working American people is bad news for Wall Street. Inflation has remained stubbornly, mysteriously low throughout the economic expansion. Since 2009, this has prevented the Fed from raising its interest rates that made borrowing money cheap, helping people buy homes and companies to boost profits. Has also juiced stocks. Over the past year, inflation has begun to slowly creep higher. The Fed has followed suit by gradually raising some rates, but it's only, 2.1%. Prices rose 2% in the past 12 months. So, fuck Wall Street.